I found $25,000 in my closet that my father had taken. He spent it all on my sister's wedding. Then my grandfather walked in and asked, "Son, where's the money I gave you to keep safe?" My dad looked at me, turned pale, and everything fell apart. You know that feeling when your entire world gets ripped out from under you, not by some stranger, but by your own flesh and blood? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, Jacob. My grandfather, the man who taught me everything, entrusted me with $25,000 cash, a sacred test of responsibility. But then my own father found it, and without a word, he spent every single dollar on my sister's extravagant wedding. The real heartbreak hit when Grandpa walked in, asking the one question that made my blood run ice cold. If you've ever had family betray your trust in a way that just guts you, then you know this pain. That day my grandfather walked in, it didn't just change me, it shattered my family as I knew it. My relationship with them, especially my parents, has always been complicated. See, my grandpa Warren pretty much raised me. While my parents were always caught up in their demanding jobs, Grandpa was there. He picked me up from school. He taught me about responsibility, about what it means to be a man of integrity. We bonded over baseball games, fishing trips, and his incredible stories of building his construction business from absolutely nothing. Every summer, I'd spend weeks at his lakeside cabin, learning practical skills, soaking up his wisdom about life and money. It was pure gold. My father, Robert, though, he always seemed to favor my sister, Allison. It wasn't blatant enough to ever complain about without sounding like a jealous kid, but the pattern was undeniable. When Allison needed a car for college, Dad bought her a brand new Honda. 2 years later, when I needed one, I got a used Ford with over 100,000 miles on it. Allison wanted to study abroad in Paris. Parents found the money. I wanted to attend a summer program in Boston. I was told to save up myself. These little inequities, they just piled up over the years, becoming a mountain of quiet resentment that I tried desperately to bury. My mom, Patricia, was the peacemaker, but her version of peacekeeping always meant convincing me to let things go rather than actually addressing the favoritism. Allison just needs more support than you do, she'd say. Or, you're so independent, Jacob. We know you can handle things yourself. While those were meant as compliments, all I heard was that I couldn't count on them the way Allison could, and that hurt deeply. Then came the wedding planning. About 6 months ago, Allison got engaged to her boyfriend, Thomas, and that's when the extravagance started. She wanted a destination wedding at a vineyard, a designer dress, gourmet catering, professional everything. My parents tried to gently suggest more affordable options at first, but Allison would just tear up, talking about how she'd dreamed of this day her entire life. Somehow, the budget kept expanding, even as my father occasionally mumbled about financial concerns. Meanwhile, my own financial situation was tight, but stable. I was working 30 hours a week at a local garage, finishing my mechanical engineering degree. Living at home at 24 wasn't ideal, but it meant I could save money and avoid student loans. I also picked up weekend gigs delivering packages and doing odd jobs. Every single dollar was accounted for. Savings, tuition, minimal personal expenses. I was so proud of my work ethic and financial discipline, traits Grandpa Warren had instilled in me. Grandpa Warren, by the way, built his company from a single truck and a toolbox into a regional business employing 50 people. Now retired in his 70s, he was still sharp as a tack, mentoring me and other young people in the family. He believed in earning what you received in testing character through responsibility. He'd helped family members with business investments or home down payments, but only after they'd shown financial responsibility. His assistance was never a handout, it was always a lesson. The $25,000 came into my possession 3 months before the wedding. Grandpa invited me to lunch at his favorite diner, where we always had our most important conversations. After catching up about my classes and work, he pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Jacob," he said in his gravelly voice, "I've always appreciated your work ethic and honesty. I want to entrust you with something important." Inside was $25,000 in cash, mostly crisp $100 bills. Before I could speak, he raised a hand. "This isn't a gift. Not yet. It's a test of responsibility. I want you to keep this money safe for 3 months. Don't spend it. Don't tell anyone about it. Don't deposit it in a bank. Just keep it secure. After 3 months, we'll talk about what this money might be used for in your future. I was stunned, not just by the amount, but by the trust it represented. When I asked why why the secrecy, he simply said, sometimes the true test of character is what you do when no one is watching. And sometimes the true test of family is how they respect boundaries. I took that responsibility extremely seriously. Back home, I created a hiding spot in my closet, removing a section of baseboard and hollowing out a space in the wall. I put the money in a waterproof container, sealed it, and concealed the spot perfectly. Nobody would find it, unless they were tearing the room apart. I checked on it weekly, not because I distrusted my family, but to ensure the hiding place was secure. The pride I felt at being trusted like that was immense. For once, I felt recognized for the reliable, trustworthy person I'd worked so hard to become. Grandpa saw something in me that my parents seemed to miss, and that validation meant everything. I was determined not to let him down. Every Sunday morning, while my family was at church, I performed my ritual. Carefully remove the baseboard, extract the container, count the cash to ensure it was all there, then return everything exactly as it had been. This routine gave me a sense of security, of accomplishment. 3 months seemed like a long time, but I was already halfway through the waiting period, without incident. Then came the day that changed everything. I returned from a double shift at the garage to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. Alarm bells immediately went off. I always closed it completely. Entering cautiously, I surveyed the room. Nothing seemed obviously disturbed, but something felt off. My instincts screamed that someone had been searching through my things. My heart pounding, I went straight to the closet. The clothes were arranged slightly differently. I dropped to my knees and examined the baseboard. My stomach plummeted when I saw slight scratch marks around the edges that hadn't been there before. With trembling hands, I removed the section. The hollow space was empty. The container with $25,000 was gone. No, 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 I whispered frantically, searching deeper into the space, as if the money might have shifted further back. Nothing. I tore through my closet, throwing clothes and shoes aside, hoping maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. But deep down I knew this wasn't a mistake. After the initial panic subsided, I had to figure out who. I started with my mother, finding her in the kitchen. Trying to keep my voice casual, I asked if she'd been in my room. No, honey. Why would I need to go in there? She replied, giving me a curious look. Her confusion seemed genuine. My mother was never a good actress. Next, Allison was out with her fiancé, according to Mom, but would be back for dinner. I waited impatiently, pacing the house, trying to think of who else. When my father returned from work, his behavior immediately struck me as suspicious. He avoided eye contact, seemed unusually interested in the mail. When I directly asked if he'd been in my room, his response was sharp, defensive. Why are you interrogating everyone? If you have something valuable, you should put it in the bank like a responsible adult. He snapped, then quickly changed the subject. That evening at dinner, I watched my family like a hawk. Mom was normal. Allison arrived, bubbling with excitement about wedding details, including a surprise upgrade to their venue package. My father remained quiet, but kept glancing at Allison with what looked like relief whenever she mentioned the wedding plans. After dinner, I overheard a conversation between Dad and Allison in the living room that confirmed my worst fears. The vineyard owner was so accommodating when we increased our budget. Allison was saying, the fountain display during the reception is going to be beautiful. I'm just glad we could make it work, my father replied. Your special day should be everything you dreamed of. Where did the extra money come from, anyway? Allison asked. Last month, you and Mom were worried about even affording the basic package. There was a pause. Then my father answered vaguely. Sometimes opportunities present themselves when you need them most. Don't worry about it, princess. The next day, I found wedding vendor receipts in the trash. Recent dates. Substantial amounts. The vineyard deposit alone was $15,000. Another $5,000 for the catering upgrade. Various smaller expenses. It perfectly accounted for the missing $25,000. My father, who'd been stressed and short-tempered about money for months, was suddenly relaxed, generous. When Allison mentioned adding an $800 chocolate fountain, he just waved his hand dismissively. Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still couldn't believe my own father would steal from me. I tried several times to talk to him privately. Once, I approached him in the garage. Dad, I need to talk to you about something important, I began. Can it wait, Jacob? I promised your mother I'd fix the fence this weekend, he replied, without looking at me. It's about some money that was in my room. A significant amount. At this, he finally turned, his expression hardening. Money? What money? Are you doing something illegal? No, of course not. It was given to me by Grandpa Warren. Your grandfather gave you money without telling me? His tone became angry. How much? Money. $25,000, I admitted. He asked me to keep it safe as a kind of test. My father laughed, but there was no humor in it. A test? That sounds like one of Warren's manipulative games. Listen, son, if your grandfather wanted to help this family, he should have given that money to me, not sneak it to you behind my back. But Dad, the money is gone. Someone took it from my hiding place. His face flushed red. Are you accusing me of stealing? Is that what this conversation is about? I just want to know what happened to it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe there never was any money. Maybe you spent it yourself, and now you're trying to blame someone else. Or maybe your grandfather never gave it to you in the first place, he retorted, turning back to his tools. This conversation is over. Each attempt at confrontation ended similarly: deflection, denial, or outright hostility. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. My father had invaded my privacy, stolen something entrusted to me, and then gaslit me when confronted. The man who should have been teaching me about integrity was demonstrating its exact opposite. As the wedding date approached, my anxiety grew. Grandpa Warren would be returning from his extended vacation just in time for the ceremony. The 3-month period would be up, and he would expect me to have kept my promise. How could I explain that I had failed his test so completely? In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I watched in silent horror as Allison's celebration transformed from an already expensive affair into something truly extravagant. The original venue, a local country club, was suddenly not quite right. Allison announced they had secured Pine Ridge Vineyard instead, a picturesque estate that typically hosted celebrities. The upgrade cost an additional $12,000, almost half of the stolen money right there. The catering changed from a respected local company to a renowned chef specializing in farm-to-table cuisine with wine pairings. The floral arrangements expanded from simple elegance to elaborate displays featuring out-of-season blooms imported from South America. Allison selected a designer dress that cost $5,000, replacing the one she had initially chosen for $2,000. My father nodded approvingly at each escalation, his previous concerns about cost conspicuously absent. I even tried to reason with Allison one afternoon. Allison, can I ask you something about the wedding? I said, taking a seat across from her. Sure, but make it quick. I have 50 more of these to finish today, she replied, not looking up. All these upgrades, they seem really sudden. Where's the money coming from? That got her attention. She put down her pen and looked at me, curious. Dad said he found some extra money. Why do you care? Are you jealous or something? I'm not jealous, I said carefully. I'm concerned. Until very recently, Dad was stressed about affording even the basics for your wedding. Now, suddenly, money is no object. Allison rolled her eyes. Maybe he got a bonus at work. Maybe he took out a loan. Maybe Grandpa Warren helped out. Why are you trying to ruin this for me? This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life. She picked up her pen again, signaling the end of our conversation. My mother was equally unhelpful. When I cornered her in the laundry room and expressed my concerns, she became visibly uncomfortable. Jacob, honey, finances are complicated. Your father handles our money, and if he says we can afford these things for your sister, then we can afford them. But Mom, what if the money came from somewhere it shouldn't have? She paused, folding a towel with excessive precision. What exactly are you suggesting? When I explained about the $25,000 Grandpa had entrusted to me, her face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered. That sounds like a misunderstanding. Your father would never take something that didn't belong to him, especially not from his own son. Perhaps you miscounted. Or perhaps you're confused about how much there was to begin with. Despite her words, I could see the doubt in her eyes. She knew my father was capable of justifying almost anything when it came to providing for Allison. Desperate to fix the situation before my grandfather discovered the theft, I took on additional work, picking up every available shift at the garage, finding odd jobs around town. I sold my gaming console, my collection of rare vinyl records, even my laptop, replacing it with a much cheaper model. I took out a cash advance on my credit card despite the exorbitant interest rate. After 3 weeks of this extreme effort, I had managed to save just over $6,000. It was impressive, but nowhere near enough to replace what had been taken. The mathematics were implacable. Even if I continued at this pace, I would have at most $8,000 by the wedding day. The remaining $17,000 might as well have been $17 million for all my ability to replace it in time. The weight of this failure pressed down on me constantly. I had trouble sleeping, often lying awake, calculating and recalculating. I lost weight because food had become tasteless. My performance at work and school began to suffer as my anxiety mounted. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations continued at a frantic pace. Allison was constantly on the phone with vendors, making last-minute adjustments. My father threw himself into tasks, coordinating with photographers, arranging transportation, selecting premium spirits for the open bar. When the wedding invitations went out, I noticed they'd been upgraded too, from simple cardstock to thick, textured paper with gold foil accents and custom wax seals, another unnecessary expense that likely came from my stolen money. The weekend before the wedding, my parents hosted an extravagant rehearsal dinner at an upscale steakhouse. A private room, open bar, multi-course meal for 30 people. It must have cost at least $3,000. I sat through the event in a fog, pushing food around my plate, offering weak smiles. My father gave a tearful toast about giving his little girl the wedding she deserved, no matter what it took. The bitter irony of his words made me feel physically ill. That night, I tried one last time to address the situation with my father. I found him in his study, reviewing seating arrangements. "Dad, Grandpa Warren is coming back tomorrow for the wedding," I said without preamble. "Yes, I know. He's staying at the Marriott because we don't have room here with all the wedding guests," he replied, not looking up. He gave me $25,000 to keep safe as a test, the exact amount that mysteriously appeared for Allison's wedding upgrades. My father finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of anger and something else. Fear. "Perhaps. We've been through this already. I don't know anything about your money. Maybe you should ask yourself if you actually deserve that kind of trust from your grandfather. He's going to ask me about it," I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "What am I supposed to tell him?" For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "Tell him whatever you want. But remember, if you try to cause drama at your sister's wedding with wild accusations, you will be the one who looks bad, not me." As he turned back to his seating charts, I realized this conversation, like all the others, was going nowhere. The wedding was 2 days away. My grandfather would be arriving tomorrow. I was completely out of options. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, almost mockingly perfect weather for what I knew would be a disaster. I had barely slept, rehearsing over and over what I would say to my grandfather. Should I lie to protect my father? Should I tell the truth and potentially ruin my sister's wedding? There seemed to be no good options. Our house was chaotic by 7 a.m., with my mother rushing around, organizing last-minute details while my father loaded supplies into his SUV. Allison had stayed overnight at a hotel with her bridesmaids. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Pine Ridge Vineyard. "Jacob, are you ready?" My mother called up the stairs. "We need to leave for the venue in 30 minutes. I adjusted my tie in the mirror, noting the dark circles under my eyes. My rented tuxedo fit well enough, but I felt like an imposter wearing it. How could I participate in this celebration, knowing it was built on theft and deception? As I descended the stairs, my father glanced at me and frowned. "You look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" Not really, I admitted. Been thinking about a lot of things. Well, pull yourself together. This is your sister's day, and I will not have you bringing everyone down with your mood. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My father checked his watch, looking confused. Who could that be? We're not expecting anyone here. My mother opened the door, and I heard her surprised exclamation. Warren, we thought you were meeting us at the venue. My blood ran cold. Grandpa wasn't supposed to be here yet. I'd expected a few more hours to prepare myself. Thought I'd surprise you. Came Grandpa's familiar gravelly voice. Figured you might need an extra pair of hands this morning. He stepped into the foyer, looking exactly as he had 3 months ago when he'd entrusted me with the money. Tall and straight despite his 70 years, with a full head of silver hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He was already dressed in his best suit, a vintage 3-piece he reserved for special occasions. Jacob, my boy, he said warmly, pulling me into a firm embrace. Good to see you. You look like you've been working too hard. Good to see you, too, Grandpa. I managed, my voice sounding strangled even to my own ears. He kept his arm around my shoulders as he greeted my father with a handshake. Robert, everything ready for the big day? As ready as we'll ever be, my father replied with a forced smile. It's going to be quite an event. I bet it will be. Allison always did have expensive taste, Grandpa remarked, with just a hint of disapproval in his tone. He'd always been more impressed by practicality than extravagance. We moved to the living room where my mother offered coffee and pastries. The conversation remained light, focused on wedding details. I sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, waiting for the inevitable question. My father seemed equally tense, checking his phone repeatedly. Finally, as we were about to leave for the venue, Grandpa turned to me with a smile. Almost forgot the real reason I wanted to stop by early. It's been 3 months, Jacob. Son, where's the money I gave you to keep safe? The room went silent. My mother looked confused. My father, who had been checking his watch, again froze, his face draining of color. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The moment I had dreaded was here, and I was paralyzed. Jacob, Grandpa prompted, his smile fading as he sensed something was wrong. The $25,000. Our arrangement. My father suddenly became very interested in gathering up the coffee cups, keeping his back to us. My mother's confusion deepened. Warren, what money are you talking about? She asked. I gave Jacob $25,000 3 months ago to hold for me. A test of responsibility, Grandpa explained, his eyes never leaving my face. Today is when we discuss what happens with it next. The silence stretched painfully until I finally found my voice. Grandpa, the money. It is gone. Gone? He repeated, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. What do you mean, gone? Someone took it from my hiding place, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandpa's expression hardened. Who took it, Jacob? I couldn't bring myself to directly accuse my father. Instead, I said, it disappeared about a month ago, right around the time the wedding budget suddenly expanded. All eyes turned to my father, who had gone completely still facing away from us. Slowly, he turned around, his face ashen. Robert, Grandpa's voice was dangerously quiet. Do you know something about this? My father swallowed hard, then attempted a dismissive laugh that came out more like a cough. This is ridiculous. We need to get to the venue. We can discuss this later. We will discuss it now, Grandpa said firmly. Did you take money from Jacob's room? After a moment of tense silence, my father's posture changed, defiance replacing his initial shock. Yes, I found the money, but I was going to pay it back. It was just borrowing, not stealing. Robert, my mother gasped. What was I supposed to do? My father continued, his voice rising. Allison's wedding was coming up, and we were short on funds. Then I find out my father gave my son $25,000 in secret, money that could have helped our whole family. Grandpa's face darkened. That money was not yours to take. It was entrusted to Jacob. Specifically, why him and not me? My father demanded. I'm your son. Jacob is just a kid who lives in my house. If anyone deserved that money, it was me, to help give my daughter the wedding she deserves. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of the wedding planner who knocked enthusiastically on our front door. My mother answered automatically, her face still showing shock. Good morning, Matthew's family. The big day is here. The planner, Melissa, breathed in, with a clipboard and a bright smile that quickly faltered as she sensed the tension. Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay, Grandpa said bluntly. It seems my son has stolen $25,000 from my grandson to pay for today's extravaganza. Melissa's smile disappeared completely. Oh, I see. Should I wait outside? That would be best, my mother said quietly. After the planner retreated, my father turned on me with fury in his eyes. Are you happy now, Jacob? You had to bring this up today of all days. You couldn't wait until after your sister's wedding. I didn't bring it up. I defended myself. I've been trying to talk to you about this for weeks and you refused. Both of you stop, Grandpa commanded. He turned to my father. Robert, you had no right to take that money. It was not a gift to Jacob, not yet. It was a test for him, one that you ruined. And now you have the audacity to blame him for your theft. It wasn't theft, my father insisted. It was redistributing family resources where they were needed most. Allison needed that money for her special day. Jacob was just hoarding it. I was doing exactly what Grandpa asked me to do. I shouted, years of resentment finally boiling over. But you never thought about that, did you? It has always been Allison first, with me as an afterthought. The sound of a car door slamming outside momentarily distracted us. Through the window, I could see my sister emerging from a car, still in regular clothes, presumably coming to collect something. The front door opened, and Allison walked in, freezing when she saw all of us standing tensely in the living room. What is going on? Why is everyone still here? We need to be at the venue like right now. Ask Dad where the money for your vineyard wedding came from, I said bitterly. Allison looked confused. What are you talking about? Grandpa stepped forward. Your father took $25,000 that I had given Jacob to keep safe. He used it to pay for your wedding upgrades without permission from either of us. Allison's hand flew to her mouth. Dad, is that true? My father's anger seemed to deflate somewhat in the face of his daughter's shock. I was trying to give you the wedding you always wanted, Princess. The money was just sitting there, doing nothing. So, my dream wedding is paid for with stolen money? Allison's voice rose hysterically. From my own brother? How could you do that? It wasn't stealing, my father insisted again. Jacob is part of this family. What benefits? One of us benefits all of us. That is not how trust works, Robert, Grandpa said severely. That money represented something important between Jacob and me. You had no right to interfere. The wedding planner poked her head back in, looking extremely uncomfortable. I really hate to interrupt, but if we don't leave now, we will miss our time slot for the venue setup. Chaos erupted as everyone began talking at once. My mother tried to mediate, suggesting we postpone the discussion. My father insisted we all just get in the cars. Allison was in tears, repeating that her wedding was ruined. Grandpa stood firm. Accountability could not be postponed. In the midst of this, Thomas, Allison's fiancé, arrived, confused by the delay and the tension. When Allison tearfully explained the situation, he looked shocked, then angry. You funded our wedding with stolen money, he asked my father, incredulously. Sir, with all due respect, that is completely unacceptable. Not you too, my father groaned. Look, everyone needs to calm down. We have a wedding to get to. How can we proceed with a wedding built on theft? Thomas asked, putting his arm around Allison. What kind of foundation is that for our marriage? As the argument continued, guests began arriving at the house, having misunderstood the meeting location. Small groups of confused relatives on our front lawn added to the surreal quality of the morning. What should have been a joyous occasion had devolved into a family reckoning that none of us were prepared for. Against all odds, and after much heated discussion, the wedding did proceed that day, though in a form much altered. Grandpa Warren, always practical, even in his anger, recognized that hundreds of guests were already en route, and thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits had been paid. He proposed a compromise. The ceremony would go forward, but he would publicly announce that he was retroactively funding the wedding as a gift to the couple, legitimizing the source of the money. The solution was imperfect, but it allowed the day to continue without completely destroying my sister's moment. Grandpa made it clear, however, that This came with the condition that my father would work to repay him every dollar over the next year. The ceremony itself was beautiful, but subdued. The vineyard setting provided a picturesque backdrop that almost made you forget the morning's revelations. Almost. The tension was palpable beneath the surface. Smiles didn't quite reach eyes. I stood at the altar as a groomsman, watching Allison and Thomas exchange vows about honesty and trust that now seemed tragically ironic. My father walked Allison down the aisle with a stiff smile, avoiding eye contact with Grandpa, who sat stoically in the front row. My mother dabbed at tears that I suspected were not entirely happy ones. The reception that followed was equally strained. The lavish decorations, gourmet food, and premium open bar that had cost so much more now seemed tainted. Guests who were unaware commented on how beautiful everything was, unknowingly twisting the knife with each compliment. Allison and Thomas left the reception early, around 9 p.m., instead of the planned midnight conclusion. They made excuses about an early flight for their honeymoon and slipped away. I noticed they barely spoke to our father before departing. With the bride and groom gone, the remaining guests began to leave. By 10:30, only immediate family and a few close friends remained, picking at leftover cake and making awkward small talk situations. A partition sale would mean forcing the sale of the entire property and splitting the proceeds according to ownership percentages. It was a nuclear option I had no intention of pursuing, but the knowledge that I had such recourse was empowering. What about the rent they've been charging me? I inquired. Brian sighed. That's a bit more complicated. If there was no formal rental agreement acknowledging your ownership stake, you might have grounds to reclaim some of those payments, but that would likely require litigation, and family lawsuits get messy fast. I thanked Brian for his insights, my mind already working through various scenarios. I didn't want to destroy my relationship with my family, but I desperately needed to establish boundaries and gain respect. The deed provided a path to both. Over the next few weeks, I intensified my apartment search while carefully observing the family dynamics. My parents continued to prioritize Jared's streaming endeavors. Despite minimal progress, he had upgraded to a streaming schedule posted on the refrigerator, which he rarely followed. His follower count had increased marginally, mostly through aggressively spamming his high school social network. Meanwhile, I had found a promising apartment, a one-bedroom unit in a modern building about 20 minutes from my workplace. The rent was higher than my contribution at home, but the space was entirely mine, with no risk of sudden repurposing. I submitted an application and was approved within days. With my exit plan secured, I developed a strategy for revealing my ownership stake. I wouldn't use it as a weapon, but as a shield against any attempts to maintain financial control over me after I moved out. I anticipated that my parents might expect me to continue contributing to household expenses even after leaving, as they had hinted at such expectations when Jared's older sister briefly moved out 2 years earlier. The timing had to be perfect. I would announce my plans to move, observe their reaction, and only reveal the deed if necessary to establish clear boundaries. My goal was not revenge, but respect and recognition of my autonomy. As I packed my belongings discreetly, I reflected on my grandfather's foresight. He had always been concerned about the family's tendency to favor Jared, though he never criticized my parents directly. The property deed was his way of ensuring I would have leverage when needed, a safeguard against exactly the kind of situation I now found myself in. Always have an ace up your sleeve, Adam, he used to tell me. Not to cheat, but to protect yourself when the game turns unfair. The game had indeed turned unfair, and it was time to play the ace my grandfather had thoughtfully provided. I marked my calendar for the family meeting I planned to call, setting the date for exactly 1 week before my apartment would be ready. The confrontation I had been avoiding for years was finally on the horizon, and for the first time, I felt prepared to face it. I chose a Sunday evening for the family meeting, knowing everyone would be home. My apartment lease was signed, the security deposit paid, and moving arrangements confirmed. The only remaining step was to inform my family of my decision and establish the new boundaries our relationship would require. I entered the living room at 7 o'clock sharp, finding my parents already seated on the couch, expressions of mild curiosity on their faces. Jared slouched in the armchair, barely looking up from his phone. "Thanks for meeting with me," I began, standing. Rather than sitting to maintain a position of authority, "I have an announcement to make." My father raised his eyebrows. "You're not usually one for announcements. Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I've signed a lease on an apartment. I will be moving out next Saturday." There was a moment of surprised silence before my mother spoke. "Well, this is sudden. I thought you were saving for a down payment on a house." "Plans change," I replied simply. "The apartment is close to work and fits my needs perfectly." My father frowned, clearly calculating something in his head. "This seems impulsive, Adam. Have you worked out the finances?" "Renting means throwing money away instead of building equity." "I'm aware of how renting works," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "My finances are in order." Jared finally looked up from his phone. "Can I have your bedroom when you leave? I could use the extra space for my equipment." I ignored him, keeping my focus on my parents. "I wanted to give you proper notice and make sure we're all clear on the arrangements going forward." My mother nodded, her expression shifting to something resembling relief. "Well, you're 28. It's about time you had your own place. We'll miss your help around here, of course." "About that," my father interjected, "I assume you'll still be contributing to the household expenses. Your brother's career is just taking off, and we could use the continued support during this transition period." And there it was, exactly as I had anticipated. Even as I was leaving, they expected me to continue financially supporting the family, particularly Jared's career. "No," I stated firmly. "I will not be contributing to this household after I move out. My financial obligations here will end when I leave." My father's expression darkened. "That seems rather selfish, Adam. After all we've done for you, allowing you to live here below market rate. To save money." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Below market rate? I have been paying $1,500 a month for a bedroom. That is well above market rate for a single room in this area." "This isn't just any house," my mother argued. "This is your family home, and family supports each other. Family support should go both ways," I pointed out. "My office was taken away without discussion. My equipment was used without permission. My boundaries have been repeatedly violated. And now you expect me to continue financing this household from afar." My father stood up, his face flushing with anger. "You've had it easy here, Adam. Do you have any idea what housing costs these days? Good luck paying your bills without our help." Something snapped inside me. After years of being the responsible one, of contributing far more than my share, of having my needs dismissed for Jared's whims, I had reached my limit. "Without your help," I repeated incredulously. "I have been subsidizing this household for years. And as for housing costs, I am well aware of property values in this area, including the value of this house of which I own 25%. The room went completely silent. My mother's face drained of color. My father froze mid-gesture. Even Jared looked up in confusion. "What did you just say?" my father finally managed. With deliberate calm, I removed the folded deed from my pocket and handed it to him. "Grandfather left me a quarter ownership of this house when I was 13. It's all legally documented and recorded with the county. I have been paying rent on a property I partially owned for the past 6 years." My father unfolded the document with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the text. My mother moved beside him, reading over his shoulder. Her hand flew to her mouth in shock. "This cannot be right," she whispered. "Your grandfather would have told us." "He did tell you," I said, recalling information Brian had shared from the property records. "The deed." My father had retreated to a corner table with a glass of scotch, while my mother moved between groups, trying desperately to maintain some semblance of festivity. Grandpa found me sitting alone on the vineyard's terrace, staring out at the illuminated grapevines. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, lowering himself onto the bench beside me. "Of course not," I replied. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the muted music still playing inside. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," I finally said. "I failed your test. I should have found a better hiding place or told you when I first suspected the money was gone." He turned to face me, surprise evident. Jacob, you didn't fail anything. This was not your fault. But I was responsible for keeping the money safe. That was the whole point, right? Grandpa sighed deeply. The point was to see if you could be trusted with responsibility, and you proved that you could. You did everything right. What happened was not a failure on your part, but a betrayal by someone who should have respected boundaries. You're not disappointed in me? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. Not in the slightest, he assured me, placing a hand on my shoulder. If anything, I'm more impressed with you now than before. You tried to make it right, tried to earn back the money, tried to address the situation directly with your father. Those actions show character. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by confusion. Then why the test at all? What was the point of the $25,000? Grandpa looked thoughtful. The money was a test, yes, but not just for you. It was a test for your entire family, though they didn't know it. I wanted to see how they would respect something entrusted to you specifically. That seems a bit manipulative, I said hesitantly. He chuckled. Perhaps it was, but I've been around long enough to know that people don't always show their true colors in everyday situations. Sometimes you need to create circumstances that reveal character. And my father failed the test, I said quietly. Your father made a serious mistake, Grandpa corrected. But people can learn from their mistakes if they are willing to face them honestly. Inside, I could see my mother trying to convince my father to leave. He seemed resistant, gesturing toward us on the terrace with his drink. What happens now? I asked. That depends on a lot of things, Grandpa replied. Mainly on whether your father is willing to make amends, not just financially, but by acknowledging the damage he has done to trust within this family. The following weeks were incredibly difficult. My father avoided being home, leaving early for work, returning late. When he was home, he was distant and defensive. My mother tried desperately to mediate, suggesting family dinners that inevitably devolved into tense silence or passive-aggressive comments. Allison and Thomas returned from their honeymoon 2 weeks after the wedding, but they weren't the glowing, relaxed newlyweds we expected. They seemed stressed and subdued. Allison called me the day after they got back, asking to meet for coffee without our parents. At the cafe, she fidgeted with her new wedding ring, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to apologize. She finally said, I had no idea about the money. I know you didn't, I assured her. Still, I feel horrible. My wedding was paid for with money stolen from you. Every time I look at the photos, all I can think about is how it was all built on a lie. The money wasn't technically mine yet, I said, trying to ease her guilt. It was Grandpa's test. Allison shook her head. That doesn't make it better. Dad should never have taken it, regardless of whose it was. She hesitated, then added, Thomas and I have been talking. We're thinking of paying back our portion of the money, at least what was spent on the wedding. I was surprised. You don't have to do that. Grandpa already worked something out with Dad. It's not about obligation, she insisted. It's about doing what is right. Besides, I can't stand knowing that every time you look at me, you're thinking about how Dad always favored me, even to the point of stealing from me. This conversation was the first step toward healing the rift between my sister and me. While we had never been especially close, the shared experience of our father's betrayal created a new kind of bond. For the first time, Allison was seeing the pattern of favoritism that had shaped our family dynamics for years. A month after the wedding, my mother organized a family dinner, insisting that everyone attend, including Grandpa Warren. The atmosphere was awkward. No one quite sure what to say. After serving the meal, my mother cleared her throat. I think we need to talk about what happened. We can't go on like this, pretending everything is fine when it clearly is not. My father stared down at his plate. What is there to talk about? I made a mistake. I'm paying Warren back. End of story. It's not that simple, Robert, Grandpa said firmly. Money can be repaid. Trust is harder to rebuild. The conversation that followed was painful, but necessary. My father initially tried to justify his actions again, claiming he had only been thinking of the family's happiness. But when confronted with the hurt he had caused, especially to me, he finally began to see the situation from another perspective. I guess I never really thought about how it would make you feel, Jacob, he admitted reluctantly. I was so focused on giving Allison her perfect day that I Convinced myself taking the money was justifiable. And what about the fact that you've always put Allison first? I asked, voicing the resentment that had built up over years. This was just the most extreme example of a pattern that has existed my entire life. My father looked genuinely surprised. That's not true. I love both of you equally. Your actions have not shown that, my mother said quietly. I've seen it too, Robert. Little inequities, different standards, different levels of support. I should have said something years ago. As difficult as it was, that dinner marked the beginning of a long process of family reconciliation. My father's initial apology was incomplete and somewhat defensive, but it was a start. There would be many more conversations, some productive, others frustrating, as we all worked to rebuild what had been broken. The real turning point came unexpectedly about 2 months after the wedding. I was working late at the garage when my father showed up looking uncomfortable, but determined. Do you have a minute to talk? He asked, hanging back by the entrance. I wiped my hands on a shop towel and nodded. Sure. Let me tell my boss I'm taking a break. We walked outside to the small picnic table where employees usually ate lunch. The autumn evening was cool, the sun already setting. I've been doing a lot of thinking, my father began awkwardly. And I owe you a real apology. Not the half-hearted ones I've been giving, but a genuine acknowledgement of how wrong I was. He took a deep breath. Taking that money was inexcusable. I violated your privacy, betrayed your trust, and then tried to justify it instead of admitting I was wrong. But worse than that, I've been thinking about what you and your mother said about favoring Allison. At first, I wanted to deny it, but the more I reflected on the past, the more examples I could see. This level of self-awareness was new for my father. I had never heard him speak so honestly about his own shortcomings. Why do you think you did that? I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious. He thought for a moment. Allison was always more, I don't know, demonstrative about her needs. She would cry or get upset, and I would rush to fix whatever was wrong. You were always so self-sufficient, even as a little kid. I think I mistook your independence for not needing me as much. I did need you, Dad, I said quietly. I just learned not to show it because the response was never the same as when Allison asked for something. He winced at this truth. I see that now, and I am so sorry, Jacob. I failed you as a father. In many ways. What made you come to this realization? I asked. Your grandfather, actually. He has been meeting with me weekly, supposedly to discuss the repayment plan, but really to make me face what I did. He can be pretty relentless when he wants to be. My father smiled slightly. He made me see that this was not just about the money, but about respect, trust, and treating my children equally. That conversation was the first of many healing interactions between my father and me. He had taken a second job on weekends to accelerate his repayment to Grandpa, which meant I saw him less. But when we did see each other, our interactions had a new honesty and mutual respect. Allison and Thomas also became part of the healing process. Despite my objections, they insisted on contributing toward repaying Grandpa, saying it was important for their own peace of mind. Thomas, who came from a family that valued direct communication, often facilitated difficult conversations when tensions arose. My mother found her voice in a way I had never seen before. Where once she had always defaulted to keeping the peace at any cost, she now spoke up when she saw old patterns emerging. She became an active participant in reshaping our family dynamics rather than a passive observer. I enabled your father's behavior for years, she admitted to me during a private conversation. I saw the favoritism, but told myself it was not my place to interfere. I was wrong, and I'm sorry, Jacob. 3 months after the wedding incident, I made a significant decision with my grandfather's support. Using some of the money he had originally intended to give me after the test, I put a deposit on a small apartment closer to campus. Moving out of my parents' home was both practical for my studies and symbolic of a new independence. The day I moved, my father helped carry boxes and furniture. As we assembled my bed frame, he said something that surprised me. I'm proud of you, son, not just for your hard work or your grades, but for how you have handled this whole situation with more maturity than I showed. You are becoming a fine man, and I can take very little credit for that. That's not entirely true, I replied after a moment. You taught me plenty, even if some Lessons were about what not to do. He laughed gruffly. Fair enough. I hope I'm teaching better. Lessons now. My grandfather visited my new apartment the following weekend, bringing a houseplant and a toolbox as housewarming gifts. As we sat in my sparsely furnished living room, drinking coffee, he seemed pleased. This is good, Jacob. Your own space, on your own terms. I couldn't have done it without your help, I acknowledged. Nonsense. You would have gotten here eventually with or without me. I just helped speed things along. He set down his coffee cup. There's something I want to tell you. The $25,000 was always meant for you, not just as a test. What do you mean? The test was real, but the end result was predetermined if you passed. That money was intended to help you start your life after graduation, whether for advanced education, starting a business, or whatever you chose. I just wanted to make sure you were ready for the responsibility. And was I? Even though the money was taken? Grandpa nodded firmly. You were. How you handled the loss proved that even more than if nothing had gone wrong. Character is revealed in adversity, not comfort. 6 months after the wedding, my father completed his repayment to Grandpa ahead of schedule, thanks to his second job and contributions from Allison and Thomas. To mark the occasion, Grandpa invited the entire family to dinner at his home. After the meal, my father stood up, looking nervous but resolved. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Warren, thank you for giving me the opportunity to make amends, both financially and otherwise. Jacob, thank you for your forgiveness, which I am still working to earn. Allison and Thomas, thank you for your generosity and understanding. He turned to my mother. And Patricia, thank you for standing up for what is right, even when that meant standing up to me. I am a better man because of it. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, which he handed to me. This is a copy of a receipt for a bank account I have opened in your name. It contains $25,000, separate from what I repaid to your grandfather. This represents my commitment to treating my children equally and acknowledging the special milestone of your upcoming graduation. I was speechless, not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. My father had truly understood the deeper issues at play and was taking concrete steps to address them. Thank you, Dad, I said, simply unable to find more eloquent words in the moment. You don't need to thank me for what should have been yours all along, he replied. Just know that I am trying to be better, to be the father you deserve. As we left Grandpa's house that evening, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in our family. The painful revelation at the wedding had forced us to confront long-standing issues that might otherwise have festered indefinitely. While the process had been difficult, the result was a family dynamic built on greater honesty, respect, and equality. 1 year after the wedding incident that had so dramatically altered our family, we gathered at my apartment to celebrate my college graduation. I had completed my mechanical engineering degree with honors and had already accepted a position with a respected firm in the city. The changes in our family were subtle but significant. My father, true to his word, had worked hard to rebuild trust and treat his children equally. He still occasionally slipped into old patterns, but now recognized and corrected himself, often with gentle reminders from my mother. Their relationship had evolved too, becoming more balanced as my mother continued to assert herself, rather than simply keeping the peace. Allison and Thomas had settled into married life and were expecting their first child. My relationship with my sister had deepened considerably, where once we had been distant, connected only by family obligation. We now had regular sibling dinners and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. It's strange, Allison remarked during one such dinner. If Dad had never taken that money, we might never have addressed all these issues. We would have just continued with the same dysfunctional patterns indefinitely. Sometimes it takes a crisis to force change, Thomas added, though I would have preferred a less dramatic one for our wedding day. My own healing journey had been complex. The initial pain and betrayal had cut deep, affecting my ability to trust not just my father, but others in my life. For several months, I found myself constantly checking and rechecking things, afraid of being taken advantage of. Again, with encouragement from Grandpa, I had started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and trust issues. Dr. Laurel helped me process my feelings of betrayal without allowing them to define my future relationships. She introduced me to techniques for setting healthy boundaries while still remaining open to connection. Trust is not an all-or-nothing proposition, she had explained in one particularly insightful session. You can trust people in some areas while being cautious in others. The goal is not blind trust, but informed trust. Grandpa Warren had played a crucial role in everyone's healing process. His wisdom and steady presence provided an anchor when emotions threatened to overwhelm us. He never shied away from difficult conversations, but always approached them with compassion rather than judgment. During a fishing trip 6 months after the incident, he shared something that changed my perspective significantly. You know, Jacob, your father made a serious mistake, but in some ways he was set up to fail. What do you mean? I asked, surprised by this take. I raised him with very rigid ideas about a father's role as provider and protector. In his mind, ensuring Allison had her dream wedding was fulfilling that role. His methods were wrong, but his motivation came partly from values I instilled in him. Grandpa cast his line into the lake thoughtfully. I sometimes wonder if I had been more balanced in my teaching, if I had emphasized emotional support as much as financial provision, whether things might have been different. This recognition that even my grandfather, whom I had always seen as infallible, could reflect on his own parenting mistakes, gave me a more nuanced view of my father's actions. It didn't excuse what he had done, but helped me understand it in the context of generational patterns. My father had his own revelations to share. During a Saturday morning when we were working together on restoring an old motorcycle, a project we had started as a way to rebuild our relationship, he opened up about his own journey. I've been seeing someone too. A counselor, he admitted somewhat sheepishly. It has been helpful to understand why I always favored Allison. It was not really about loving her more. What was it about? I asked, genuinely curious. He thought for a moment as he tightened a bolt. Partly, it was about feeling needed. Allison made it clear when she needed something, and fixing her problems made me feel important, necessary. With you, I never got that same feeling because you solved your own problems. And now I understand that being a good father is not just about solving problems or providing things. It is about recognizing each child's unique needs and respecting them as individuals. He looked up from the motorcycle. I am still learning, but I am trying. The financial lessons from this experience were equally profound. Money in families is never just about dollars and cents, but about values, power, and trust. When my father took the money from my closet, he was not just taking cash, but also taking my agency and betraying the trust placed in me. Through discussions with Grandpa, I came to understand that financial boundaries are essential, even within families. Being related to someone does not grant automatic access to their resources. Each family member deserves financial autonomy appropriate to their age and situation. As our graduation celebration wound down with plates of half-eaten cake scattered around my living room and family members engaged in comfortable conversation, Grandpa pulled me aside onto my small balcony. I'm proud of you, Jacob, he said simply. Not just for your degree or your new job, but for how you have handled this past year. You found a way to forgive without forgetting, to rebuild relationships without sacrificing your self-respect. I had a good teacher, I replied, bumping his shoulder lightly with mine. He smiled. We all did. Sometimes life teaches the hardest but most valuable lessons. Looking through the sliding glass door at my family, I realized that while the betrayal had been painful, the growth that came from it was priceless. My father was more self-aware and equitable. My mother was more assertive. My sister was more considerate, and I was more confident in my boundaries while still being open to connection. The $25,000 that had caused so much trouble was long since repaid, but its true value had been in the painful but necessary family transformation it initiated. Trust, once broken, could indeed be rebuilt, but the new structure would always bear the marks of having been repaired. Those marks were not weaknesses, but reminders of the work and commitment required to maintain healthy relationships. As we move forward as a family, we do so with greater awareness of our patterns and pitfalls. We communicate more directly, address issues before they fester, and respect each other's boundaries. The Wedding day crisis that I once thought would destroy us ultimately strengthened us in ways I could never have anticipated. If you've experienced a betrayal of trust within your family, know that healing is possible, though it requires honesty, effort, and time from all involved. The path forward isn't about forgetting what happened, but about creating new patterns based on mutual respect and understanding. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone close to you? I'd love to hear your story or thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that family relationships can be healed, even after serious breaches of trust. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most painful experiences.